I trusted my daughter with an emergency card. Instead, she stole nearly $20,000 for luxury in Florida. She lied, smiled, and thought I was blind. But I watched every charge, airline, hotel, and champagne dinner. I waited until she landed. Then I pulled the rug from under her. What I did next flipped my family, my will, and her future upside down. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. I sat alone in my living room that late afternoon, the soft golden light spilling through the blinds, painting long stripes across the hardwood floor. The house was quiet. Too quiet, except for the ticking of the old clock on the mantel. My eyes drifted to the framed photo above the fireplace, the family portrait taken 20 years ago. We were younger then. Linda was still alive, her smile steady and warm. Kayla, just a teenager, with that mischievous grin. And Michael, barely 15, was already serious beyond his years. I stared at that picture, and the weight of the silence pressed down on me. Because now, after everything, I knew the truth. My own daughter had betrayed me, and not just in some small, careless way. She had drained my account, taken my trust, and turned it into her personal playground. The memories came flooding back, and I let them. I thought of all the sacrifices I had made for Kayla. $60,000 for her college tuition, 4 years at Emory. I worked late nights back then, took consulting jobs I didn't want, just so she could study what she loved. When she demanded a BMW for her 16th birthday, I knew it was too much, but I gave in. $35,000, gone, just so she wouldn't feel embarrassed pulling into the high school parking lot. That car didn't last more than 6 months before she totaled it, and I paid again, covering the insurance hike. Then her wedding, $40,000 for a ceremony so lavish it still makes my stomach tighten. Flowers flown in, a ballroom draped in gold, photographers snapping every second. I told myself she deserved to start life with joy, with abundance. Every check I wrote, every dollar I handed over, I convinced myself it was love. But sitting there, in that fading light, it didn't feel like love. It felt like I had been buying her loyalty, and somehow I had lost even that. My gaze shifted across the room to the window, where the neighborhood looked still, the lawns trimmed neatly. This house, $600,000 in market value now, was the crown of all I had built. The roof over our heads, the hearth where Linda had once read bedtime stories. I always planned to pass it down, not just the property itself, but the memory of family, the safety of a home that was earned, not given. Along with it, I had $300,000 in savings, carefully built over decades, and a $200,000 trust fund established for Kayla's 30th birthday. All of it, every piece, was meant as a legacy. Not a handout, not a bribe, but a bridge to their futures. For both children, for Kayla and Michael equally. But now I saw how shaky that foundation had become. One child had turned those sacrifices into fuel for entitlement. The other treated even the smallest loan as sacred, something to be repaid with gratitude. The scales were no longer balanced. They were tilting heavily toward hard truth. I remembered the exact moment the betrayal unfolded. It was so casual, so disguised, that at first I almost brushed it off. A text from Kayla showing off the view from her Florida resort suite. Dolphins in the distance, champagne glasses sparkling in the foreground, her and Ryan's smiles wide. I tried to convince myself she had paid for it herself. But something inside me, a father's intuition maybe, whispered otherwise. When I logged into my bank's website, the numbers stared back at me like a wound ripped open. American Airlines, $1,200. Oceanfront Grand Resort, over $12,000. A luxury rental car, nearly $900. Helicopter tour, $750. All under my name. The card I had given her years ago, for emergencies only, now bled nearly $20,000. And in that moment, as I scrolled through each charge, I realized it wasn't just money. It was trust. It was 30 years of fatherhood, stolen with the click of a button. I leaned back in my chair that night, and the coldness spread through my chest. She hadn't even hesitated. She had lied, looked me in the eye, and lied. The anger rose in me, but what surprised me more was the clarity. Because as I sat with the bank statement in front of me, I couldn't help but compare. Kayla versus Michael. The two lives I had raised, side by side, but so different in how they carried the weight of family. Michael, who drove a 15-year-old Honda Civic he bought himself, worked 60 hours a week and never once asked for more than what he needed. The time his car broke down, he borrowed $500 from me and repaid it in 2 months, with interest. When he and his wife were starting, he asked me to co-sign a lease, but insisted on covering the deposit himself. Even at his wedding, when I offered to pay the full cost, he refused half, saying, "Dad, it's my responsibility." And then Kayla, the BMW, the tuition. The trust fund money vanished in less than 2 years. Every gift I gave became a stepping stone to another demand. And here it was, all over again, but bigger, more brazen. $20,000 just ripped from me without a thought. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about what kind of father I had been and what kind of daughter she had become. I whispered into the quiet room, my voice catching in my throat as my eyes went back to the photo on the mantel. "Linda," I said softly, "did I do this? Did I raise her to believe everything was hers for the taking?" The words trembled. It felt like I was talking to her ghost, reaching for comfort I would never again feel. I tried to give her the world, and now she's turned into someone I don't even recognize. You see it too, don't you? Our baby girl has become a stranger. The silence answered me, heavy and unbearable. My throat tightened, and I felt both anger and grief clawing at me. Because Linda had always believed in family first, in generosity, in giving without keeping score. But even she, I thought, would draw the line here. Even she would see this wasn't love anymore. This was theft. I rose from the chair slowly, almost like a man much older than 65. My knees stiff, my hands trembling slightly, I walked to the cabinet in my study where I kept the old financial folders. The leather binder was heavy when I pulled it out, the weight of decades of careful planning. Inside, I flipped through the records, college tuition checks, car receipts, loan repayments from Michael, credit card statements from Kayla. And there, tucked into the back, the trust fund papers. $200,000 set aside, scheduled to vest next year. My signature is still crisp on the dotted line. The plan had been so simple, to give her security, to make sure she never struggled. But as I stared at the papers, a different feeling stirred in me. They weren't secure anymore. They were leveraging. They were powerful. They were, for the first time in years, a weapon in my hand. And as I stood there, holding those papers, I felt the anger harden into something sharper. Determination. I could hear my own thoughts, steady now, no longer lost in confusion. She thought I was weak. She thought age had softened me, that I would look the other way while she emptied my pockets. But she was wrong. I wasn't weak. I wasn't blind. And I wasn't finished. I placed the binder firmly on the desk, the sound echoing through the quiet room. I looked at it like a soldier might look at a rifle, not just ink and paper, but a line drawn in the sand. This house, this savings, this trust, they were mine to protect, mine to decide, and I would not let betrayal rewrite my legacy. I sat down at the desk, my hand resting on the folder, and whispered, "They think I'm powerless, but they'll learn soon enough. This isn't over." And in that moment, for the first time since the betrayal was revealed, I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt ready, ready to fight back, ready to take control. I woke before dawn, sat at the kitchen table, and opened the folder I had left there like a loaded question. The legal pad showed the same blunt figures I had copied from the bank, $19,800 for a Florida fantasy that was never mine to fund. The coffee steamed beside me, untouched. I traced the total with my finger, slow, steady, the way a man checks a scar. The shock that had shaken me in Chapter 2 had cooled. What I felt now was clean, like a blade rinsed in cold water. I was done just understanding. I was ready to act. I logged in again, not because I doubted the numbers, but because I wanted the discipline of rereading what had been done to me. American Airlines, 1,147. Oceanfront Grand, $12,450. Enterprise Rent-A-Car, $890. Blue Water Helicopters, $1,200. Paradise Dining, $750. Then the smaller drops become a flood. Taxis, tipped drinks, airport snacks are priced like jewelry. I wrote every line on the pad and dated it. Documentation is not revenge. It is respect for the truth. The first call I made was to the credit card company. I kept my tone warm, the way you speak to someone who can help you if you let them. I asked to freeze the account, cancel the physical cards, and remove the authorized user. The representative read disclosures in a kind voice. When she asked, "Are you certain about removing her?" I said, "Yes, I am." She confirmed, and I thanked her. Manners cost nothing, and I planned to spend my energy where it mattered. Next, I called the hotel. I gave my name, the last 4 digits, and the confirmation number pulled from the statement. The clerk put me on hold, music playing the same 3 notes over and over, and then a manager came on. He explained the policy. I told him I understood. Cancel the presidential suite. Accept the fee. Email the confirmation. Then I called the rental desk listed on the reservation. Then the helicopter tour office. Then the 5-star restaurant that bragged about a chef trained in Paris. Each time I was polite, firm, and final. For a minute, I just listened to the house. The old clock on the mantel clicked. Somewhere above me, a pipe settled. The gold morning light slid along the floorboards I had sanded myself the summer Michael moved out. I pictured Kayla and Ryan in the air, first class, lifting plastic cups of champagne, confident that the world loved their plans as much as they did. I let that picture live in my mind because it reminded me why consequences belong to the person who earned them. The phone buzzed on the table. Kayla. I watched it ring out. A text arrived a moment later. "Dad, quick question. Is your Amex glitching? Front desk says payment is acting weird." I stared at the words, hearing her cheerful tone in my head. I waited 5 minutes, then called her back. She answered brightly, the way she sounded at 14 when she wanted permission and believed charm was enough. She described the suite, the balcony, and the private beach. I listened, then asked calmly, "Are you using my card for this trip?" There was a pause I could feel in my jaw. She said no. She said maybe my number had been hacked. She said not to worry, it would get fixed. The words sounded like lines rehearsed in a mirror. I did not argue. "Thanks for the heads up," I said. "I'll call the bank." We hung up. The room settled. I stood and carried my mug to the sink, rinsed it, and let the water run until it turned cold. She believed I would do what I had always done, absorb the problem, fix it quietly, and refuse to name it. That belief was leverage, and for once it belonged to me. I called Jim Henderson, my lawyer, for 15 years. Jim wastes no words and never chases applause. I said, "I need to review the trust and protect the house and savings." He asked one question, "Is this about Kayla?" I said, "Yes." 2 o'clock, he said. No judgment, just time and a door to walk through. Before 2, I drove to the bank, the old brick branch where the tellers still know your name and ask about your back. I asked to see the manager, a woman with neat handwriting and a steadiness I trusted. I told her simply that an authorized user had misused a card and that I wanted to add protections across my accounts. We set text alerts for any transaction over $500. We added a verbal password for wire transfers. We locked external transfers from savings for the next 30 days. She printed the new balance for me to review. When I signed the forms, my hand didn't shake. Driving home, I took the long way, past the park where Linda and I used to walk at dusk. The air had that clee-after-rainin smell, even though the clouds had only threatened. In my head, I reviewed what the house was in plain dollars and what it was in memory. $600,000 in market value, true, but also the sills I painted in October light, the banister I tightened, the year the kids were all elbows and running feet, the piano Kayla begged for and forgot. Money can measure price. It cannot measure weight. At 2, I sat across from Jim at his oak desk. The blinds were half closed, the room lit like a quiet church. I handed him the folder with the trust documents and the fresh statement showing the Florida charges. I told the story without heat. He read, nodded, and made neat notes with a fountain pen. "We can amend the trust," he said. "Remove Kayla as beneficiary and designate Michael. There is a notice period, 30 days. We can also update your will. We can file a homestead declaration on the house. And we can prepare a strategy if she takes this public." He looked at me over the lenses. "Do you want to proceed?" "Yes," I said. Not loudly, not bravely, just plainly. He calendared the signing for the next morning. He handed me a yellow sheet with checkboxes, copies to sign, notices to send, items to gather. He told me to keep documenting, to stay unemotional on paper, even if I was bleeding in private. I told him I could do that. He believed me. I believed in myself. Back at the house, the phone vibrated again. A text from Kayla. "We had to grab a motel for tonight. Disgusting. The hotel messed up. Can you call and straighten it out?" I took a screenshot, time-stamped it, and added it to a new folder on my desktop titled Florida Trip. Then I made dinner I could eat standing at the counter, eggs and toast, simple food that says a man is busy and alive. After the dishes, I sat in the darkened living room and let the quiet hold me up. Action has a rhythm. You do the next right thing, then the next. At 8, my phone pinged with a notification. I had been added to a new group chat named Family. The profile photo at the top was Kayla at the beach, chin tilted like a billboard. Her first message landed like a thrown glass. She wrote that I had sabotaged her anniversary trip out of spite. She wrote that I had always used money to control her. She wrote that this time I had crossed a line. I read the whole thing twice. Before I could decide whether to answer, Michael posted a short reply. "Kay, Dad didn't sabotage anything. He's protecting himself." His calm made the truth sound heavier. Kayla shot back that Michael had played the good son for years to win the will. She typed that he had been rehearsing for my death since high school. She said no one in this family loved her unless she smiled for the camera. I stood there with the phone in my hand and felt the ground shift under the house that had carried us all. Private betrayal is a dagger. Public accusation is salt. I did not reply. I walked to my desk and opened the folder. I dragged screenshots into it, one after another, until the thread was complete. I printed them and slid the pages beneath the bank statements. I added the cancellation emails, 20 of them, each with the same final word: canceled. I placed a pen on top, not as decoration, but as a promise to keep writing down what actually happened. Then I took a breath that reached the bottom of my lungs and felt, for the first time that day, steady. Kayla called at 9. I answered because I wanted the record of my voice, even and steady. She described the motel carpet as if it were my fault. The pattern was old. She said the desk clerk had treated her badly. She said the system was broken. She waited for me to agree. I asked again, quietly, "Are you using my card?" She inhaled. Then she said the line she had chosen earlier. "No, Dad, your number must have been hacked." I let a beat pass. "Thank you," I said. "I've already spoken with the bank." She asked if I could fix everything. I told her I could not. We ended the call like two neighbors who had nothing left to borrow. I slept. Not long, but well enough. In the morning, the to-do list pulled me up by the shoulder. I called my insurance agent and added an umbrella policy. I emailed Jim a clean scan of everything I had prepared. I called the county recorder and confirmed the fee for the homestead declaration and the hours for walk-in filing. The woman on the phone had a pleasant voice that made even bureaucracy sound like hospitality. I thanked her, genuinely. At noon, Michael called. He said he loved me and that he was here if I needed anything. He didn't lecture his sister. He didn't ask me to choose. He just stood next to me without being in the room. I told him I was okay and that I was handling it. I said I might need him to witness a signature later in the week. He said, "Just tell me when." After we hung up, I stood in the hallway and let gratitude settle where anger had been. Family, I thought, is not a last name. It is a way of standing. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 1 below to let me know you're here with me. In the afternoon, I went to the shipping store that also does notary work. The clerk stamped what needed stamping and slid the documents back with a nod that felt like permission. On a whim, I bought a card with a lighthouse on it, the beam-cutting rain. I wrote 2 words inside and propped it on the kitchen counter where I would see it in the morning. Stand firm. Toward evening, the group chat burst again. Kayla posted a photo from a nicer lobby and wrote that everything was fine now, that good things happen to good people, and that karma had handled it. The self-satisfaction in those sentences was almost a scent. Michael stayed quiet. So did I. Silence is not surrender. It is choosing a different battlefield. Before bed, I printed 1 more page, a letter to myself, dated and signed, listing each action I had taken and each confirmation I had received. I placed it in the folder with the rest. Then I walked through the house with the lights off, the way I used to when the kids slept, and I wanted to be sure every latch was set. I touched door frames, the cool metal of window locks, and the piano key that always sticks. In the hallway, I paused at the photo of Linda cradling baby Kayla. "I'm not cruel," I whispered. "I'm careful." I set out my suit for the morning and laid the folder beside it. I put my keys on top so I couldn't forget what mattered. I slept with the window cracked and woke to the smell of wet grass. I shaved, made coffee, and ate toast with peanut butter the way Linda always insisted gave a man energy. On my way to Jim's office, Kayla called. I let it go to voicemail. In the message, she said the motel had overcharged and asked me to dispute it. She said the whole situation was unfair. Unfair. I turned down the radio and let the car be quiet. Jim's conference room smelled faintly of paper and lemon cleaner. He had laid out the documents in a neat line, each with a small tab that said, "Sign here." He walked me through each one, his voice as steady as a metronome. Trust amendment, beneficiary change from Kayla to Michael, notice of 30-day period, updated will, and homestead declaration. He slid the pen toward me. I signed and dated. With each signature, I felt an old rope loosen around my chest. When we finished, he tapped the stack into a tidy pile. "Next," he said, "we serve notice properly. If there's a smear, we answer once with facts, then go quiet." I nodded. He has always preferred facts to fireworks. So do I. Outside, the sun was high and the wind strong enough to move the flags in front of the courthouse across the street. My phone chimed. An email from Jim, copies of the signed documents, and a checklist for next steps. Below that, the thread of cancellation emails stared up at me like a row of closed doors. Canceled, canceled, canceled. I slid the phone back in my pocket and stood there for a minute, watching traffic, feeling the ground under my shoes. Control isn't loud, it is weight. On the drive home, I stopped at the cemetery without meaning to, habit or gravity. I stood by Linda's stone and told her the truth. I said I was late to learn, but I had learned. I said I loved both our children and that love without boundaries had almost ruined one of them. I said I would do better, even if doing better meant being called names that hurt. The wind lifted, and I took it as permission to leave. The mailbox held a thick envelope from Jim's office, hard copies of what we had done. I set them on the dining table and poured a glass of water. The house felt aired out, like a room after the last of the smoke has cleared. I opened the folder and looked again at the line where Kayla's name had been. I didn't feel triumph. I felt alignment. Near 6, the group chat lit up. Kayla said a friend who knew the law told her I couldn't cut her off. She said family money was family money. She said I was breaking promises. The confidence in her words was the same confidence that had taken my card without asking. I typed one sentence. I won't discuss legal matters in a group chat. Michael reacted with a small blue thumb. Kayla sent 5 more messages that I did not open. I muted the thread for 8 hours. Night settled. I took the lighthouse card in my hand and read the words I had written. Stand firm. I said them out loud, slowly, so the room could keep them for me if I forgot. Then I added one more line, for myself alone. They think I've lost, but the game has only begun. Saying it didn't make me smug. It made me steady. I checked my voicemail before bed. 2 numbers I didn't recognize had left curt requests asking for a comment about family allegations. A neighbor had called and simply asked if I was okay. I deleted the first 2 and saved the neighbor's kindness. Then I printed a single page titled, Statement, 3 calm sentences for the record, to be used once if needed and never again. I placed it on top of the folder and turned off the lamp. The plan was simple. I would not argue online. I would answer once with facts, then go quiet. Tomorrow, notices would go out, and the truth would leave my desk and enter the world without apology, attached. I felt ready for the noise. At the top of the stairs, I looked down at the first floor one last time before bed. The folder waited in plain sight, square and patient. The suit hung ready. The keys lay where I would find them. Everything simple. Everything chosen. I knew the next days would be noisy. I knew there would be stories online and accusations in public, and that strangers might decide who I was based on the loudest voice they heard. I also knew who I was when the house was quiet, a man who built something and who would keep it. I went to bed with a clear promise in my chest. The day my daughter comes home, she will not meet the father who softens at every tear and reaches for his wallet. She will meet the father who loves her enough to refuse her lies. She will find the door open because I am not done being her dad. She will also find a line she cannot cross. That line is new, and it is mine to draw. And I will be standing right there, steady as a lighthouse, ready for whatever the morning brings. I woke to the light of my phone instead of the sun. Overnight, my daughter's face had taken over the feed. In the first video, she looked fragile and brave, as if she had practiced both poses in the mirror. She said I had always used money to control her. She said I had canceled her dream anniversary out of spite. The caption read, Toxic parent tries to sabotage happiness. Hearts and angry faces poured in like confetti and stones. I watched the views climb and felt something inside me go still, the way a pond freezes all at once under a sudden cold. She posted again. The second clip was longer, filmed in a quiet lobby corner with soft music sighing in the background. She told a story about the years I supposedly refused to help her buy a home, forcing her to live in a shoebox while I hoarded savings. I stood in my kitchen and said 2 words into the empty room. Not loud, just true. $30,000. I could see the cashier check the day I handed it to a smiling agent as the deposit for her first condo. In her video, Kayla tilted her head at the end, as if bearing a wound, and asked strangers to back her up. They did, quickly, faithfully, without knowing a thing. My phone rang with the old analog tone I never bothered to replace. Eleanor from next door spoke softly, like she had set down a hot casserole and didn't want it to spill. She said she had just seen a video that was named after me. She told me to be careful with my good name, that reputation is like glass. I thanked her for the kindness and the warning. She apologized for meddling. I told her she wasn't meddling. She was being a neighbor. Then the calls came, one after another. Old coworkers, cousins who only call in December, a man from church who once borrowed my ladder. They asked if it was true that I had stranded my daughter on purpose. I said the same 3 sentences each time, in the same steady voice. My card was used without permission. I canceled reservations I did not authorize. I won't debate family matters by phone. I ended politely and wrote small notes on my legal pad, date, time, and name. Facts are a fence when feelings stampede. I started a new folder on my laptop, the way I had done with the Florida charges. I saved every video, every story, every caption. The internet forgets at the exact speed that truth needs to be remembered. I took screenshots of comments where strangers called me names I will not repeat. I opened a clean document and typed a simple heading: Social Media Record, Kayla Foster. The page was filled with links and timestamps until it looked like a map of a storm. At noon, I drove to Jim Henderson's office. The conference room smelled faintly of lemon and paper. Yesterday, we signed the trust amendment and the updated will. Today, Jim added a packet he called notices, formal letters on his letterhead explaining exactly what happened and why I had acted. They were not angry letters. They were clear, one addressed to Kayla, one to Ryan as a courtesy, and one to my bank for the file. He laid them out like tools he trusted. Jim asked if I was prepared for them to show up at my door. I said yes. He advised me to keep the door shut, to speak through the storm door, and to let my doorbell camera do its quiet work. If they threaten you, call the police. If they plead, do not let them in. Either way, read only from the page. He tapped a single sheet titled Statement. "We are past improvisation," he said. I nodded and folded the page into my pocket like a small shield. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 2 below to let me know you're here with me. On the way home, I stopped at the post office and sent the notices by certified mail. The clerk slid green return cards toward me and stamped my receipts with a firm thunk that sounded like a gavel. I tucked the receipts into my wallet behind a photo of Linda. Even on paper, her smile calmed me. "We're almost there," I whispered, and for a second it felt like she answered by steadying my hands. Back at the house, the feed had grown louder and meaner. Kayla posted a third video. She called me financially abusive, said I dangled money like a leash, and flashed a cropped screenshot of a text where I had written, "I won't fund bad decisions." Out of context, it read like a slap. In context, it followed a week of patient messages about a luxury car lease she could not afford. I photographed the entire thread, date stamps and all, and dropped the images into the folder. Truth needs light and a label. Near 5 o'clock, a white sedan I knew pulled to the curb. Ryan's. The exhaust burped as he yanked the key. My chest went still, then steady. The doorbell camera woke with a small blue ring. I stepped into the foyer and left the main door latched. Kayla's mascara had run from crying or from making herself look like she had. Ryan's jaw worked like a stubborn machine. Kayla started fast, words in clumps. She said I had humiliated her, that I was jealous, that I wanted her miserable. She used the same word she had taught to her audience, toxic, as if it were a new hammer that could fit any nail. I lifted Jim's page and read it slowly, the way you read a prayer when your hands want to shake. My card was used without my permission. I canceled reservations made with it. I will not discuss family matters at the door or online. You will receive a letter from my attorney. I stopped there. Kayla laughed at the word attorney, not with humor, but with the brittle sound people make when they hit a wall. Ryan called me a coward and told me to open the door and be a man. The doorbell camera watched all of it, blank and faithful. I repeated the 3 sentences. Kayla said they were homeless for the night because of me. I looked at their car and kept my mouth closed. Ryan pounded the doorframe with the side of his fist, not hard enough to break, just hard enough to rattle. I breathed evenly and let silence sit between us. Silence is a bucket of sand on a small fire. Either the sparks go out or the one blowing runs out of breath. They left in a drift of words that slid off the glass and fell into the shrubs. Moments later, my phone warmed with notifications. Kayla had gone live from the curb, whispering that I would not even open the door. The comments arrived like a parade that had lost its music. I set the phone face down and made a sandwich I could chew calmly. No one gets to decide my heart rate for me. By morning, the certified mail receipts had hit my inbox, both signatures, scanned in green. 10 minutes later, Kayla called. Her voice came from far away, thin and tight. She asked what the papers meant. She said this was cruel. She said I was cutting her out of family money. I used the same tone I had used at the door. The trust is amended. My will is updated. Notices have been served. She said I would regret this. Regret is for people who don't keep records, I said, and the line went quiet. Within an hour, she posted again, 2 minutes of trembling outrage framed by soft hotel light. She held up the notice on camera, names blurred, and said I had disowned her to punish her for being happy. He thinks he can control me with a piece of paper, she said. The comments cried for justice while ignoring it. I saved the clip and stepped outside to breathe air that hadn't passed through the internet. That afternoon, Jim called to check on me. He said he had filed the homestead declaration with the county, so the house, $600,000 in market value and a lifetime in meaning, had armor around it now. Think of it like a roof added to your roof, he said. Rain can fall all day and your table stays dry. He asked if I had the copy of the $30,000 condo deposit. I told him it was already scanned into the folder. He asked about the text context. Also saved. Good, he said. Truth travels best with company. Evening brought another knock, this one careful. A process server in a navy jacket stood on the porch, polite and precise. Are you Raymond Foster? He asked. I said yes. He handed me an envelope and a small card with a case number printed cleanly. You've been named in a complaint, he said. Please respond through counsel. It was fast, faster than I expected. I thanked him. He said he was sorry for the trouble and walked back down the path like a man who knows not to look into windows. At the dining table where Linda used to lay out school forms, I opened the envelope. The complaint alleged emotional abuse and financial manipulation and asked for $250,000 in damages. It claimed I refused to help with housing, then listed a date off by a year. The truth has no trouble with dates. I placed the complaint on top of the folder, took a single photo of the first page, and called Jim. He said 3 words I needed. We'll answer calmly. The next morning, the county emailed back a scanned copy of the recorded homestead, a small seal embossed in the corner like a quiet shield. Jim's paralegal sent a draft response to the complaint, all muscle and no fat. We attached exhibits, the cashier's check for $30,000 to the escrow company, the full text thread with timestamps, copies of the cancellation emails, and the doorbell video still that showed Ryan's fist striking my doorframe. I read the packet twice. It felt like picking up a weight with both hands and finding I could carry it. Before lunch, Eleanor knocked. She stood on the porch with a plate of lemon bars like a treat from an older, kinder time. She said she remembered the day I came home with the closing folder for Kayla's condo, how I waved it like a flag on the sidewalk. She offered to say what she had seen at my door, voices raised, my voice low, Ryan hitting wood with the side of his hand. I thanked her. She said, "Reputation is a long stitch. Don't let them cut it." By afternoon, someone had leaked the complaint to the internet. I don't know who. Kayla posted a photo of herself with red eyes and the words, "Protect your peace," across the top. Strangers begged her to stay strong. Strength, I thought, has nothing to do with volume. Jim filed our response before the close of business. A messenger in a tie delivered a court-stamped copy to my door. Behind a blue tab, the $30,000 check sat like a stone in a river. Behind another, the full text thread pooled into context. Behind a third, the cancellation emails lay in a neat stack, each subject line a clean closed door. Canceled. 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 The hearing date came quickly, a scheduling quirk Jim called luck with teeth. The courtroom was paneled in old wood that smelled of polish and rules. The ceiling hovered higher than seemed possible. Kayla sat at the far table in a soft sweater and a hard expression. Ryan looked like a boy wearing a man's jacket. The judge was a woman with kind eyes and an economy of speech. She asked Jim to summarize. He stood, calm as a man ordering lunch, and laid out the timeline, the unauthorized charges, the cancellations, the notices served, the homestead recorded, the trust amended, the will updated. His voice never rose. It didn't need to. Kayla's lawyer leaned hard on words like trauma and control. When he mentioned the condo, the judge asked for documentation. Jim lifted the blue tab and handed the copy of the cashier's check to the clerk. The judge read the amount aloud. $30,000. The number rang like a bell in the quiet room. The lawyer blinked and pivoted to the text. Jim handed up the full thread. The judge read in silence, then looked over her glasses. "Counsel, please avoid partial exhibits," she said, and the sentence landed like a small rebuke wrapped in good manners. Jim played the doorbell clip without sound. The judge watched Ryan's fist hit the frame, and my mouth stayed still behind the glass. She made a small note. Jim called Eleanor by phone. Her voice came through the speaker steady and plain. She said she had seen and heard what she saw and heard. No adjectives, no theater. The judge thanked her. Ryan shifted in his chair like the jacket had begun to itch. The judge set a tight schedule for discovery and warned both sides that social media would not be tried in her courtroom. Then she addressed Kayla directly, not unkindly. "Ms. Foster, this is a civil dispute wrapped around family hurt. The court will analyze documents." Her gavel touched the block like a quiet period at the end of a long sentence. We stood, we filed out. In the hallway, I exhaled for the first time in days and felt the air reach all the way down. Outside, the sky looked scrubbed. Jim shook my hand. "The truth did some work today," he said. I nodded. I looked at the folder in his hand, blue tabs neat as book spines, and felt the weight that wasn't a burden, only a center. "They thought I was weak," I said, not loud, not for show. "Now they're seeing the cost of their choices." Jim gave a small smile that never reached his teeth. "Onward," he said, and it felt like a road. At home, the house met me like an old friend who had saved my chair. I set the court copy on the dining table and traced the edges of the tabs. I ran my thumb along the paper and thought of every dollar I had spent out of love and every dollar I had spent out of fear. Love I would keep. Fear I was done paying for. The phone sat dark and obedient. I turned it face down again and let the quiet prove it belonged to me. I stood at the mantel and looked up at the family photo that had started to feel like a painting of someone else's life. "Linda," I said, barely above a breath, "they wanted a villain. They got a father." Saying it didn't make me proud. It made me right with myself. In the kitchen, the last light turned the faucet into a thin line of gold. I let the water run cold. Then I shut it off and listened to the pipes go quiet. Tomorrow would bring the next step. Paper to file. A life to live. Before bed, I opened the laptop and wrote one line at the top of a clean page. "They don't know what I'm holding." I saved the file with a name only I would understand and slid the machine onto the shelf above the desk beside the folder that had guided me through the storm. The house settled around me like a ship at dock. I checked the locks, touched the window latches, and climbed the stairs. At the landing, I let myself feel the ache. Being called less than a father by your own child cuts where you cannot point. The cut will heal, I told myself, but the scar will tell the story. I do not mind a scar. A scar means I lived and I learned. I turned out the light and stood in the dark a beat longer, as if the night were waiting to hear what came next. It would hear me say this: "I'm done being the soft place for lies to land. I will be the hard edge of the truth." That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the folder open and the lamp throwing a warm circle on the wood. I scrolled through hundreds of comments. Some were casual and cruel, tossed like bottles from a passing car. Some were detailed and wrong, as if a committee had met to vote on my character. A woman with a sunflower avatar wrote that fathers like me should be cut off. A man with a flag in his name declared I was proof that wealth kills love. I read, not to suffer, but to understand the weather. I closed the app and listened to the house breathe. I told myself a simple sentence and let it sit. Noise is not truth. In the morning, I drove to the bank to hand-deliver Jim's notice for their records. The branch manager, a woman whose calm could lower a fever, walked me into her office and listened without interrupting. I explained the unauthorized charges again, the steps we had taken, and the alerts now on every account. She added a note requiring a verbal password on any transfer over $200. She printed the savings, $300,000 I would not let leak, and the checking with its ordinary march of bills. "We'll keep eyes on this," she said, and her voice carried the clean weight of a promise. I thanked her and slid the papers into the folder that had become a second spine. On my way out, I stood by the glass doors and watched people move through their errands. A man in a hard hat deposited a check. A grandmother asked for rolls of quarters. Life went on. I realized that was the gift of documents and deadlines. They keep you walking when the water around you tries to become a flood. I tucked the bank printouts into the folder and drove home under a sky the color of a new sheet of paper. At a red light, I pictured my house, the $600,000 roof over holidays, and the $200,000 in trust, now out of reach. Paper, yes, but also a boundary drawn, EA. Feeling unseen and dragged through the mud is heavy, isn't it? If you believe every person deserves to be recognized and to have justice, comment the keyword, justice. Now watch what they do next to change it. I remember the morning it finally felt real. Jim slid the last set of papers across his oak desk, his fountain pen poised like a judge's gavel. With one clean signature, Kayla's name vanished from the trust fund. $200,000, once meant for both children, now shifted entirely to Michael. Jim read the clause aloud for the record. Beneficiary amended, effective immediately. I signed, the ink drying quickly and darkly. For a moment, I looked at my hand. It wasn't shaking. It was steady, the way it hadn't been in months. Later that afternoon, a uniformed courier handed me an envelope, heavy enough to bruise. I sat at my kitchen table, the same spot where I had signed mortgage checks and birthday cards, and tore it open. A civil summons. Kayla and Ryan were suing me for $250,000. The language accused me of financial abuse, psychological control, and even sabotage. The words were sharp, meant to cut, but I noticed the dates were wrong and the details blurred. I set the summons beside the fresh amendment to the trust. 2 piles. One of the truths. One of the theaters. The court arrived sooner than I thought it would. The room smelled of polish and old wood, the air heavy with the kind of silence that comes before storms. Kayla sat 2 tables away, in a pale dress chosen to soften her edges. Ryan leaned back, arms crossed, smirking like he thought this was already won. Their lawyer stood tall, speaking in rehearsed rhythms about trauma, harm, betrayal. He pointed at me as though I were a monument to cruelty. Then Jim rose. He didn't perform, he didn't posture, he simply laid out the record. The bank statements show $19,800 drained in Florida. The screenshots of posts where Kayla called me toxic and abusive were stripped of context. The doorbell camera stills of Ryan's fist striking my frame. And then Eleanor's voice, calm and unwavering, piped through the speakerphone. She described what she had seen, a father steady, a daughter shouting, a son-in-law pounding like a boy denied a toy. The judge flipped through the binder of exhibits, each page tabbed and labeled. When Jim presented the cashier's check, the $30,000 I had given for Kayla's condo deposit, the judge paused. She read the number aloud. $30,000. The sound rang through the room, blunt as a church bell. Kayla's lawyer shifted, cleared his throat, and stumbled forward with a different argument. But the paper sat there, weight heavier than his words. Kayla tried to interject, her voice trembling and rising. That was family money. It was supposed to be mine. The judge tapped her gavel once, sharp, a command to be silent. Ryan muttered something about entitlement, about fathers not owning their children's futures. His words scattered in the air like dust motes without substance. The judge leaned back, eyes calm, tone precise. This court rules in favor of the defendant. No hesitation, no drama, just truth placed where it belonged. She dismissed the claim with prejudice, meaning they couldn't drag me back for the same circus. Kayla gasped as if the air had left her lungs. Ryan slammed his palm on the table, muttering curses. Their lawyer gathered papers without looking at them, as if ashamed of the script he had delivered. I didn't celebrate. I just stood. My folder in hand, the same folder that had carried every receipt, every screenshot, every memory preserved in black and white. I walked out of that room lighter than when I entered, not because the past had changed, but because the weight was no longer mine alone. Justice had shouldered it. Outside, the courthouse steps gleamed in afternoon light. People hurried past, not knowing, not caring that a family war had just ended behind those doors. I breathed deep, feeling the air fill places that had been tight for months. I whispered, not for anyone else, but for myself. They thought I was weak. They thought I was blind. But justice saw me. In the days that followed, the quiet settled into my house like a guest who finally belonged. No more midnight calls demanding money. No more posts twisting me into a villain. The trust was secure, the accounts locked. 600,000 in the home, 300,000 in savings, 200,000 now redirected to Michael, all intact. Numbers that once felt fragile now felt like walls strong enough to stand through storms. And Kayla? She faded from the feed. The furious videos slowed, then stopped. Word came back, not from her lips, but from neighbors whispering at grocery lines. She and Ryan had moved into a small rented apartment, the kind with beige carpets and thin walls. She was looking for work. He was talking too loudly at bars. Their friends, the ones who had clapped in the comments, went quiet too. Outrage is loud at first, but silence lasts longer. Michael called one evening just to say he was proud of me. His voice carried no victory, only relief. "Dad, you did the right thing. Ithinedimitat. Thank you." I told him I loved him. And for the first time in months, I said it without bitterness shadowing the word. I began to live again, small things at first, mornings with coffee on the porch, watching the world wake instead of checking my phone for new insults. Afternoons walking through the park, the sound of children playing reminds me that not all families break up. Evenings, reading books Linda once loved, her notes still in the margins, her handwriting curved and steady. I found myself breathing deeper, laughing sometimes at small things, like the way squirrels fought over birdseed or how the mailman whistled without knowing he was out of tune. Peace was not dramatic. It was ordinary, and that was what made it precious. Kayla tried once to call. The voicemail was long, a mix of tears and half-formed apologies, tangled with anger. "You ruined everything," she said, and then later, softer. "Maybe we can talk." I didn't return the call. I played it once, then deleted it. I whispered to myself, "I don't need them anymore. I have myself." The words sounded final, like a key turning in a lock that would not open again. Jim and I met once more, just to finalize the paperwork. He handed me the certified copy of the court's ruling. I held it, heavy and official, a seal pressed into paper that told the world what I already knew, that the truth, though late, had won. In the quiet that followed, I thought of Linda. I stood by her photo on the mantel and said, "I let it go too far, didn't I? I let love blind me, but I've drawn the line now." The house, old as it was, creaked softly, as if it agreed. I began to dream of change, of a life not bound by defending myself. A smaller home, maybe. A condo near the park where mornings could be about fresh air and not about battles. A place where the echoes of betrayal couldn't find me. I browsed listings, nothing fancy, just spaces with light and a balcony for plants. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. I felt like I was walking toward something waiting. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 3 below to let me know you're here with me. And I thought of helping again, not with money, but with time. The food pantry downtown needed volunteers. The library had a program for reading to children. I circled dates on a calendar. I realized that my story, ugly, heavy, painful, might serve someone else as a warning or as comfort. Betrayal cuts deep, but scars can light a path. I know Kayla and Ryan live with the choices they made. They lost more than money. They lost trust, and trust is the only inheritance that multiplies when it's shared. Without it, even wealth crumbles. With it, even ordinary days shine. Their apartment is smaller than they ever wanted, their circle thinner. Mine is fuller because it is mine, not borrowed, not demanded, not stolen. Looking back, I see the lesson clearly. Boundaries are not cruel. They are loved with a backbone. Family is not about blood alone. It is about respect, about honesty, about truth. The people who honor you are your family, no matter what their last name is. The people who betray you are strangers, no matter what their blood says. I whisper sometimes when the nights are long and Linda's absence feels close. The truth always wins. It's not arrogance. It's not comfort for comfort's sake. It is recognition. I survived. I chose dignity. And dignity chose me back. One evening, I sat on the porch as the sun set, painting the sky in the same colors Linda once loved to capture in photographs. I thought of what had ended, and I thought of what was about to begin. A life not defined by betrayal, but by freedom. A life not chained by obligation, but lifted by choice. They had called me weak. They had called me toxic. They had tried to strip me of name and worth. But here I sat, whole, calm, unbroken. I am not theirs to define, I said aloud, and the wind carried it away, like a flag. This chapter of my life closes here, but I feel the next already stirring, maybe in the laughter of new friends. Maybe in the hands I will use to serve others. Maybe in the garden I will plant outside the next place I call home. Whatever it is, it will be mine. And I promise myself one final truth before sleep each night. I am free. I am worthy. I am enough. The first night in my new apartment was strangely quiet, almost too quiet. After years in the old house, with its creaking floors and echoes of arguments, the silence felt foreign, like stepping into someone else's life. But when I opened the curtains and looked out at the park below, the city lights twinkling beyond, I knew I had made the right choice. This place had cost me $220,000. Not cheap, but worth every cent for the peace it promised. The walls were bare, the rooms smaller than I was used to, but for the first time in months, I could breathe without feeling the weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest. No photographs of Kayla smiling at her wedding, no memories etched into every corner of the house. Here, I was free to start over, to live without ghosts of fights and broken trust. I furnished the apartment simply. A soft couch by the window, a dining table just big enough for two, though I knew it would often only seat one, a new bed, a sturdy desk for my paperwork, and on the wall above the mantel I placed a single picture, Linda, my wife, smiling in her garden. I didn't bring much else from the old house. Most of it reminded me of Kayla, of Ryan, of years when love turned into entitlement. Here, in this apartment, I wanted only reminders of strength and truth. The mornings quickly became my favorite part of the day. I would brew coffee, carry the mug to the balcony, and watch the park wake up. Joggers passing by, mothers pushing strollers, an old man feeding pigeons from a bench. Their lives had nothing to do with mine, yet I felt connected somehow. I wasn't the man under attack anymore, the father accused of cruelty. I was just another neighbor, another citizen enjoying the sunlight. That was enough. But I didn't want to spend the rest of my life staring out the window. I needed to do something with the time I had left, something that mattered beyond family drama. That was when I found the community center downtown. They needed volunteers for their food pantry, people to hand out bags of groceries, and people to listen. On my first day, I wore a plain blue shirt and felt awkward, unsure if I belonged. But when a young mother smiled at me as I loaded canned soup and bread into her bag, gratitude shining in her tired eyes, I felt something shift inside. For so long I had been giving to those who only demanded. Now, giving to people who truly needed it felt like water on dry soil. Week by week, I became part of that small army of helpers. We laughed, we worked, we shared stories. I found myself driving home with a lighter heart, not because I had forgotten Kayla, but because I had remembered myself. The betrayal hadn't taken away my ability to give. It had simply redirected it to where it could grow. As for Kayla, news reached me in fragments. Ryan had left, packed his things after the lawsuit collapsed, and disappeared from her life. She was living alone now in a small rented apartment across town, struggling to find steady work. Then one morning, in the mailbox of my new place, I found an envelope with her handwriting on it. My name was written in shaky, almost apologetic. I carried it inside, sat at the kitchen table, and opened it carefully. The letter was long, filled with apologies that circled themselves. She wrote about how she felt abandoned, how she had lashed out, how Ryan had pushed her, how the world seemed against her now. And at the end, in words that trembled on the page, she wrote, "I'm sorry, Dad. Maybe we can fix this." I placed the letter flat on the table and stared at it for a long while. My heart ached, because no matter what, she was still my daughter. But I also knew the truth. Sorry doesn't erase years of lies. It doesn't undo lawsuits or public humiliation. Sorry is a beginning, not an ending. And I was too tired for beginnings that only circled back to pain. I left the letter where it was. I did not respond. "I don't need their apologies," I whispered aloud, my voice steady in the empty room. "I have my life. I have myself." The words settled into me like an anchor. One afternoon, sitting in the park across from my apartment, I remembered something Linda used to say. She had told me once, after a bitter argument with Kayla when she was young, "Love cannot replace discipline. Without boundaries, love turns into something else." At the time, I thought she was too harsh. I thought endless giving would show Kayla she was cared for. Now I understand. Love without boundaries is not kindness. It is surrender. And surrender always ends in resentment. It took me nearly 70 years to understand what Linda had seen so clearly. I felt her presence in the breeze that rustled through the leaves, as if she were telling me, "You see it now, don't you?" I nodded, silently answering her. Yes, I see it. From these reflections, 3 lessons grew inside me like pillars of truth. The first was for parents like me, who think sacrifice alone will buy gratitude. It won't. Boundaries matter. You must teach your children that love is not a credit card with no limit. You can give, but you must also guide, or else your gift turns into a chain around your neck. The second was for children, grown or still young. Be grateful. Do not confuse your parents' sacrifices with your entitlement. Every dollar spent on tuition, every check written for a car, every roof placed above your head is a gift, not a debt your parents owe you. Love deserves thanks, not demands. The third was about people in general in this world that often feels so fractured and selfish. Human beings can betray, they can twist the truth, they can turn family into strangers. But truth, though slow, still stands. Justice may take time, but it arrives. And when it does, the noise of lies fades into silence. That silence is where peace begins. Life after betrayal is not easy, but it is possible. I began to notice small joys again. A neighbor's dog wagged its tail when it saw me. The laughter of children playing tag in the park. The feel of soil on my hands when I planted flowers on the balcony, bright red geraniums that Linda once loved. Each small joy reminded me that betrayal does not own every corner of life. There is still beauty, still laughter, still peace if you look for it. Kayla sent another letter weeks later. This one is shorter, almost desperate. "Please call me," she wrote. I placed it in a drawer with the first, unopened after the first lines. My boundary was firm now. If she wanted change, it had to come from her actions, not her words. And I no longer had to carry the weight of waiting for that change. Sometimes neighbors ask about my family. I smile politely and say, "I have a son, Michael. He's doing well." I do not mention Kayla, not out of cruelty, but out of choice. I protect my peace now. And protecting peace is not selfish. It is survival. One evening, as the sun sank low, I stood in the park and watched the sky burst into gold and purple. I thought of all that had been lost and all that had been gained. I thought of Kayla's face when she was 5, running through sprinklers, laughing without shadows. I thought of the courtroom, her voice breaking as the truth cornered her. 2 images of the same person, and I realized something. My love for her would never vanish, but love does not require me to suffer endlessly. Love can exist alongside distance. Love can survive without contact. That was the last piece of freedom I needed. Not hate, not vengeance, just release. As I walked home, the air cooling against my skin, I whispered to myself, I finally belong to myself again. And the words felt true. The apartment door closed behind me, the lock clicking in place. I looked around at the simple furniture, the quiet walls, and the flowers on the balcony, swaying gently in the wind. This was my life now. No drama, no shouting, no lawsuits. Just peace earned through scars. I know the future will hold challenges. Aging does not stop. Loneliness will visit from time to time. But I also know I am stronger now than I was a year ago. Stronger because I survived betrayal. Stronger because I chose dignity over bitterness. If I could leave one message behind, it would be this. Parents, love your children, but never lose yourself in that love. Children, honor your parents, but never confuse their giving with your right to take. And to everyone living in this modern world where truth often feels drowned by noise, remember that character is the only inheritance no one can steal. The sun had nearly disappeared when I whispered my final thought of the evening, the thought that closed not only this day, but this entire chapter of my life. I don't need their apologies. I don't need their approval. I have my life. I have myself. And that is enough. The story has come to an end. I hope it has brought you valuable lessons and insights. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you again.